Good morning. I'm Debbie Capazzo, a member of the Board of Trustees for Tahoma UU Congregation. As we begin our gathering, I respectfully acknowledge that I'm speaking to you today from occupied Puyallup ancestral land. I pay respect to elders past and present and extend that respect to their descendants and all Indigenous people. We welcome all who are joining us with a longing for community, hope for peace, and who seek justice. We're a diverse congregation that encourages everyone who comes through our doors to find their own truth and belief. We invite everyone to join us in a search for meaning and community, guided by respect, reason, and love. The wonderful thing about this virtual platform is that we welcome people from outside our traditional geographic area. So special welcome to new friends who are joining us from far away today. I invite you to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Links to the video version of this service will be posted there this week, as well as on our website. You can find all of our program announcements this week in the e-news and listed on our church calendar. But here are some of the highlights. We've talked about this a little bit already, but for those who didn't hear it, congratulations are in order for the Reverend Matt Aspen and the Reverend Joe Rettenmeyer. They were both ordained into UU ministry on Saturday. Matt was our intern minister a few years ago, and Joe pitched in to assist us during Linda's mini sabbatical in January. And he'll be also joining us over the summer when Linda takes her much deserved, I guess we could call it her real sabbatical. Also important, today at noon for members of the congregation, this meeting will include electing 3 board members, a board president, a member of the nominating committee, and a member of the endowment committee. We will also present the budget for our coming up fiscal year, which starts July 1st. And as members enter the Zoom room for the meeting, you will be announced as you are admitted, and that's so we can check you in to ensure we have a quorum of membership for the meeting. Please consider logging in early so we can start the meeting as close to noon as possible. Links for the meeting and meeting materials are on the calendar event on the church website. Then on Tuesday afternoon at 1:30, Doug Taylor will host a socially distanced, mask as desired, forest bathing session at Point Defiance. Point Defiance. The group is limited to 15 for this outdoor adult religious exploration experience. Please email Doug Taylor for more information. Links for all our programs can be found in the weekly e-news or via the events on our church calendar. And I want to thank everyone for your ongoing financial support to our congregation that makes all of this possible. Programs, staffing who create and facilitate the programs, and the connections we make through our congregation. Now let us prepare to gather in worship.
Good morning, friends. Our opening words today are from Gretchen Haley. Give up the fight for some other moment, for some other life than here and now, this day, this hour. Not because it does not constantly break your heart, but because it also beckons with beauty, startles with delight. If only we keep waking up. This is the gift we have been given. These body clothes, this heartbreak, this pulse, this breath, this light, these friends, this hope. When we remember ourselves, all a part of it all. Let us give thanks together. Come, let us worship.
Please ready your at-home chalice and join me in the unison reading that you can find in the chat as Nancy lights our chalice in the sanctuary. We light this chalice in deep respect for the mystery and holiness of life, in honor and gratitude for those who have gone before, with love and compassion for those who dwell among us, and with hope and faith for the generations to come.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Slocum, and I am the Director of Religious Exploration for Children and Youth here at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation. And this is our time for all ages. So I invite children and the young at heart and even the not so young at heart to listen up. For all ages. So here we are. It's the middle of June. I can't believe it. This year is just kind of zooming by. Zoom, no pun intended, of course. When I think of June, I think about many wonderful celebrations that happen in the month. For many, it's the end of school, and just finishing up school for the year to go on summer vacation is a lot of fun. But some people are graduating from one school and going on to a new experience in their life. There's Father's Day when we celebrate the dads in our lives. And it's a month when many people get married. And so there's a lot of wedding celebrations and there's a lot of anniversaries. I just posted about my son and his wife celebrating their anniversary this week. It's a great time for celebrations. There's also a holiday this month. And I'm going to be honest here. It's only in the last 10 years or so that I had ever heard about this holiday. Kind of boggles my mind that I was over 50 years old before I learned about this holiday. Can you guess what that holiday is? How many of you have heard of Juneteenth? The name is a shortened version of June 19th, and as you might guess, it's celebrated on June 19th. And it celebrates an event that happened over 150 years ago. On June 19th in 1865, in the state of Texas, US soldiers let everyone there know that all enslaved people were now free. Enslaved people, people who were held as slaves. A slave is a person who is the property of another person. That is, someone owns the person. And that the slave is forced to obey the owner, the person who has enslaved them. You know, sometimes we might use the word slave to say that we worked very hard at something. And we might say, oh, I slaved away all day to get my homework done, or I slaved away all afternoon to clean my room. And while it may mean that we work very, very hard to finish those tasks, it really doesn't equal the experience of people who were enslaved, who were held as slaves. They had to do everything the people who owned them told them to do, all the time. It wasn't just for an afternoon. It wasn't just for a day. It was all the time, and they had to work hard. And if they didn't work hard, they were punished. And sometimes they were punished severely and hurt or even killed. And they often spent their whole entire lifetimes as slaves. I find this hard to talk about. In our country, for a long, long time, people here enslaved other people. They owned people and made them work for them. Many of the slaves were from Africa. People would go to Africa and they would capture people and they would bring them to America. They were taken away from their families. They were taken away from their communities. They were taken away from everything they knew and loved, and they were forced to work here in this country. You know, we talk here in church about how important it is to respect everyone, to treat people kindly, to love everyone. We talk about treating everyone fairly and equally. But in our country, starting a few hundred years ago, there were people who felt it was okay to steal people away from their homes and force them to work here. That sure doesn't fit with our beliefs that all people should be treated fairly. It's hard to know that part of our country's history includes the fact that people were allowed to enslave others. I know I feel sad, I feel upset, I feel angry when I think about that. But it's a part of our country's history, and knowing about it can also help us remember to do better and to be better. So Juneteenth is a celebration that marks the anniversary of people learning that enslaved people were now free. They were no longer slaves. And if you think about what our world was like in the 1860s, it was really hard to get the word out to everybody. There weren't any telephones, no texting, no computers and social media like Twitter and Facebook. People had to travel, and there weren't cars either, so they had to travel by horseback and however they got there. They had to travel to the different parts of the country and tell people that they were free. So June 19th, 1865 in Texas was actually 2.5 years after they had been freed. It took that long to get the word to them. A year after that date, a year after the people of Texas learned that news, they started celebrating the anniversary of this event. The formerly enslaved people were now free, and they chose to celebrate the anniversary. It was a huge and wonderful thing that had happened for them. And for the people who were enslaved to now be free, wow, imagine. It deserved that big celebration. And over the years, that celebration has grown, and more people are celebrating that day, remembering that day. For instance, it's now a holiday in Washington State, and some people now are even getting the day off from work in order to observe Juneteenth. I wish I could say that once the slaves were emancipated, that's a big fancy word, meaning that they were freed. Once they were emancipated, everything was hunky-dory. I wish I could say that. I wish I could say things were just fine. But we have talked here before about racism, how treating people differently because of the color of their skin is still around, is still prevalent everywhere. Most of the enslaved people who were from Africa, most of them were from Africa, so they were Black people. And sadly, even though they were freed, people still discriminated against them, didn't treat them fairly or kindly. And even though it's been over 150 years since then, this still goes on. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that racism is wrong. We want everyone to be treated fairly. We want everyone to be respected. And so we feel it's important to fight against racism, to be anti-racist. That is, we work to change laws and practices that are unfair to people of color, people who are Black or brown, people who are Native American, people who are Asian. We don't want people to be treated unfairly just because their skin is not white, because we know that underneath we are all just people. So Juneteenth, June 19th, is coming up this week on Saturday. And my challenge to all of you is to talk with your family and maybe your friends and think about how you might celebrate and commemorate Juneteenth. Perhaps you'll have a picnic or a barbecue like the first Juneteenth celebration in Texas all those years ago. Maybe together you will learn more about our history, even though it can be hard to talk about sometimes. Maybe you will have conversations about racism that you see in the world today. Maybe you'll do something that's anti-racist and work to change some racist law or some racist behavior. I would love to hear from you all about how your family chooses to celebrate Juneteenth. Making sure no one was enslaved in our country was a very important event, and it is worthy of celebration. There's still a lot of anti-racist work to be done, but Juneteenth, it teaches us about our country's move towards treating everyone with respect, with dignity, with compassion, with love. Our country has not always done the right thing, but we can keep working to make it better and better. That's our time for all ages. I share with you the words we use when we sing the kids out of the sanctuary. We hold you in our love as you go, as you go. May your hearts be at peace as you go, to nurture the spark of your very precious life. We hold you in our love as you go. Take care.
Now is the time we offer our financial gifts to the work of this congregation. Thank you for your consideration to support our church during this unprecedented time apart. You may follow the link on the following slide or click the link in the chat or text your donation to contribute your support for our church members and staff working tirelessly to keep our congregation connected in new and dynamic ways. Every little bit helps, and while we're physically apart, our gifts are certainly stronger together. Please now join me in the unison reading as we dedicate this offering. We dedicate ourselves and our offerings to the work of this congregation, weaving a tapestry of love we call community, both within and beyond these walls.
My friends, I invite you into a time for meditation and prayer, a time to be still together and to reflect. I offer you this poem by Anne Sexton as a text to meditate upon today. It is her poem, Welcome Morning. There is joy in all, in the hair I brush each morning, in the cannon towel, newly washed, that I rub my body with each morning, in the chapel of eggs I cook each morning, in the outcry from the kettle that heats my coffee each morning, in the spoon and the chair that cry, hello there, Anne, each morning, in the Godhead of the table that I set my silver plate cup upon each morning. All this is God right here in my pea greenhouse each morning. And I mean, though I often forget, to give thanks, to faint down beside the kitchen table in a prayer of rejoicing as the holy birds at the kitchen window peck into their marriage of seeds. So while I think of it, let me paint a thank you on my palm for this God, this laughter of the morning, lest it go unspoken. The joy that isn't shared, I've heard, dies young. Let us pause in stillness with one another. So may it be. Amen.
Today's reading is an excerpt from Joy is Such a Human Madness in the Book of Delights by Ross Gay. The title is from the essay Joy by Zadie Smith, in which she distinguishes between pleasure and joy. Among the most beautiful things I've ever heard anyone say came from my student Bethany, talking about her pedagogical aspirations or ethos, how she wanted to be a teacher, and what she wanted her classrooms to be. What if we joined our wilderness together? Sit with that for a minute. That the body, the life, might carry a wilderness, an explored territory, and that yours and mine might somewhere, somehow meet, might even join. And what if the wilderness, perhaps the densest wild in there, thickets, bogs, swamps, uncrossable ravines and rivers, is our sorrow? It astonishes me sometimes, no, often, how every person I know, regardless of everything, by which I mean everything, lives with some profound personal sorrow. Brother addicted, mother murdered, dad died in surgery, rejected by their family. Cancer came back, evicted. Fetus is not okay. Everyone, regardless, always of everything. Not to mention the existential sorrow we all might be afflicted with, which is that we and what we love will soon be annihilated. Is this sorrow of which our impending being no more might be the foundation, the great wilderness? And if it is, and if we join them, your wild to mine, what's that? For joining, too, is a kind of an annihilation. What if we joined our sorrows, I'm saying? I'm saying, what if that is joy?
Thank you, Jonina. 6 weeks, I started a 6-week webinar a week ago this past Friday. It's going to be one of the best self-care things that I have done for myself through this whole pandemic. It's even better than the weighted blanket that I got, or really committing to walking at least 2 miles a day. It's a poetry workshop that's hosted by 2 poets, Danusha Lamaris and James Cruz. They in turn have invited their poet friends to come and talk about their craft and to read their poems to us and to talk about all of the things that lift them up and interest them. It is delicious, absolutely delicious and nourishing. This past Friday, I was especially struck by the religious tone that threaded through the conversation and the poems. Danusha just kept saying that poets helped put us in touch with the sacred. I think I heard the word sacred more in those 2 hours than I have in any ministers' gathering over the last several years. It was really striking to me. I typed into the chat at one moment that my most important scripture is poetry, almost always. It was Danusha who also noted that what poets often do for us is they offer us a frame on our lives. They provide that way of looking at something. Yes, Stacy, St. Mary Oliver. I almost mentioned St. Mary Oliver in my text. They were talking in that moment, they were talking about the capacity of everyday items to allow us to see the sacred more clearly. She named, for example, that when we look at a colander, we can be pulled into the past. It was my mother's colander, lifted to the cosmos. The holes punched in it make a design of stars, into the future as it becomes a helmet for a small child. It seems to me that what poets and preachers do, what they're able to do, is to name and describe the relationship between what is ordinary and that of the holy that it points toward. So perhaps it is not a surprise that while I was reading an essay by poet Ross Gay, that I found a new frame for joy and how it threaded through our lives. Gay is riffing off another author, another writer, Zadie Smith, in her 2013 essay, Joy, that can be found in the New York Review of Books. Both writers are very clear that there are differences between pleasure and joy. Gay describes pleasure as riding his bike down a hill to the vegan bakery where he'll have a fresh donut. Delight, also different from pleasure, he tells us, is related to joy. He says that joy is something like terror and delight sitting next to each other, their feet dangling over the side of the bridge way up high. There's the frame that's been missing, the frame around what is sacred that helps me to understand what joy really is. It arises from our deepest and most vulnerable love. It arises from our deepest and most vulnerable love. Zadie Smith lays it out very plainly. She says, sometimes joy multiplies itself dangerously. Children are the infamous example. Isn't it bad enough that the beloved with whom you have experienced genuine joy will eventually be lost to you? Why add to this nightmare the child whose loss, if it ever happened, would mean nothing less than your total annihilation? It should be noted that an equally dangerous joy for many people is the dog or the cat, relationships with animals being in some sense intensified by a guaranteed finitude. You hope to leave this world before your child. You are quite certain your dog will leave before you do. Joy, she says, is such human madness. It is this circumstance of our life, that what we love most is also the most vulnerable to every danger. It is this circumstance that Ross Gay describes as the wilderness, the unexplored territory, those places that we hesitate to go because our hearts go in our hearts because of the exquisite beauty and joy that arises from them is in proportion to the certainty of their loss at some day in the future. We appreciate the thump of the dog's tail on the floor, his often unsure glance at us, the gray that has invaded his muzzle. And we know that he is only in our lives for a short time. And isn't it that recognition of our own mortality that drifts through our minds and that lends sweetness and extra sweetness to everything? Isn't it knowing how tenuous any of this is that inclines us toward a gratitude that we have any of it at all? You know what can destroy it. It's the terrifying diagnosis that comes unexpectedly. It's a phone call in the middle of the night waking you up. It's the discovery of what is no longer possible for you to do as your body ages. It's those moments of recognition. While we live as if we are immortal, we're all limited, short timers, even as we emerge screaming as we are born. Joy comes, I think, as we notice and know those limits and the miracle that we are here at all. At the end of memorial services, I will typically remind everyone, and maybe especially myself, that we never know the span of our days. And that should call us to live with intention and care, to speak and show love and kindness always. That's the wilderness, isn't it? Is sorrow, Broske asks, is sorrow the true wild? Is it in that wilderness that we find joy? And if we were to join those wildernesses together, those wildernesses of sorrow, if we see that sorrow in another, if we find that companionship, isn't that where joy resides? It is, in my experience, only when others can see our own deep vulnerabilities, know them better than we know them ourselves. Those fears, the losses, the shameful secrets, the failures. And when we see theirs, the mistakes, the deep woundedness, the daily terrors, the heartbreak that is beyond words, it is only then that we know for certain that we are not alone, that we are joined in this condition, in this thing called life. And what if that is joy? Oh my, what if that is joy? I think it is. And so I say to you today, my friends, move toward it. Move toward the joy that cannot be separated from our most painful sorrow. Move toward the delight that is dangling its feet at the edge of the precipice. For what is our life if it is not lived in joy? May we know it and may we find it. So may it be. Amen. I invite you to breathe now, my friends, and take a few moments to pause as we take time to set an intention for the week ahead. If there's something in the words or the music that has spoken to you, I invite you to set an intention for how you will carry it from here out into your day. Let us pause in stillness. So may it be. Amen. Our closing words today are by James Hobart. As we depart from one another, let our hearts be secure through every human season. Let our hearts be secure in seasons of anguish as in seasons of joy, in seasons of failure as in seasons of success, in seasons of uncertainty as in seasons of security. Let our hearts be secure in this dual reality. We are worthy recipients of love and support we can never earn, and we are worthy providers of love and support others cannot earn. Let our hearts be secure, for hearts know and understand and will respond if invited in. May it be so with us all. Amen.
Please join me in our unison reading as Nancy extinguishes the chalice in our sanctuary. You can find the words in the chat. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our closing blessing song, that when in person we normally sing together holding hands, is brought to us by Asher today.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and of this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together